Hey guys, it's Dr. May. So we made it to the end of the sensorimotor psychotherapy skills videos today. So we're going to go over the moving forward phase of therapy and all those skills and competencies and good stuff in there today. All right, just to wrap everything up in that final section. So let's get this going. All right. So overview of phase 3, moving forward. Kind of that journey of our life, like how do we get to that kind of bonus chapter where the negative stuff is kind of worked through a little bit better, and I'm just kind of tweaking things, making things a little bit more pleasant for myself, enhancing things, my relationships. All right, so just as a refresher, we had talked earlier about 3 phases of therapy, and the sensorimotor psychotherapy skills fell into these 3 different phases. So first, we talked about developing resources. So we wanted to find different ways to help to bring us into a window of tolerance, a comfortable level of arousal more often, so we could cope with the ups and downs of life and our inner experience and memories and emotions while staying more steady without getting thrown into hyperarousal or hypoarousal. So all the resources we learned helped to balance us out better in those ways and give us more confidence that we could do it. The next phase, addressing memories. We went into dealing with some of the painful memories of our life, some of the traumatic memories, and techniques for how to do that better so that they're less disturbing to us. And those included implicit memories and just the way we react out some of the problems from our past because they were adaptive then and they kind of stuck with us. But we learned to reshape them so that our lives work out better now. So we're not using old patterns in a new situation. So the moving forward skills, this is kind of like, now that I've worked past some of those things, how do I get better at some other aspects of my life that maybe I neglected, maybe I didn't have a chance to get to because there were other more pressing things going on. So how do I continue to regulate my emotions, improve my relationships, examine some beliefs that maybe don't work for me anymore, even learn how to move in ways that are more adaptive to my current life. So all these moving forward skills were captured in this section. And finally, like I forgot to say, to increase our enjoyment and satisfaction in life. Because now that we work through everything, we've been through a lot, we might as well get greater enjoyment and pleasure out of our life and enjoy the life that we do have. So in DBT, they would say, create a life worth living. And some of the skills really are about that. So I'm going to go lesson by lesson, just give you a brief overview. So if you haven't watched the other videos before, you get a sense of what they're about. So if there's anything that you feel would be useful to you, you can go back and watch the entire video. Or if you've already watched them, it'll help you kind of put everything together so that you could keep it fresh in your mind. All right. So here we go. So lesson 28 was called the legacy of attachment. So attachment relationships have to do with the relationship of a baby or a young child to their caregivers. And we form certain patterns of relating based on those repeated interactions with our caregivers. And it's a style of relating that we often take into our significant relationships later in our life as well. So we adapt to the caregivers that we have to help ensure their love and care of us. But sometimes those adaptations no longer work in our current life, and we need to upgrade our relational patterns. Okay. So in this slide, I'm calling it identifying and upgrading relational patterns. So through our different interactions with our caregivers, they kind of shaped our behavior, so to speak. So when they made it feel acceptable to feel, believe, or move, or act in certain ways, we tended to do those things more. And when they made us feel like it was unacceptable to feel, believe, move, and interact in certain ways, we tended to do those things less because we wanted to be how they wanted us to be, to ensure their love and care. And that's the most important thing when we're growing up. It's an adaptive measure that we all take in order to survive our childhood. Okay. So when we go through this chapter, we kind of say, well, all right, what are my patterns of relating? How can I make those a little bit more conscious to me? And which ones are no longer a good fit in my life? So I kind of take an inventory a little bit of, where am I interacting now that's similar to the past, but that needs to be changed for the future. Okay. So once I realized that, I could start to say, okay, what can I do differently? How could I use different somatic resources from the first section of developing resources to help me in my difficult relationships, or to regulate my arousal when I'm with people that push my buttons? How do I, interact with a broader range of people in a more effective way so that I could have better, smoother relationships overall? All right, so next we went to beliefs in the body, okay? And beliefs are also things that we learned through our attachment relationships growing up, as well as through other sources, and they become automatic. They become our core beliefs. So as you can see in this diagram here, we develop beliefs in meaning based on our experiences over time. So especially if we have repeated experiences with people, we kind of develop a sense of ourselves, other people, and the world as a whole. And those beliefs are reflected and reinforced by our bodies and our movements. So we have to deal with both of them together in order to really reshape our beliefs. Therapies such as cognitive behavior therapy just talk about the beliefs and the thoughts without so much always going into what the body is doing. But if your body isn't supporting new beliefs, it's hard for the new beliefs to stick. So sensorimotor psychotherapy makes sure that we address the physical manifestation of our beliefs and inhibit those patterns so that we are freer to believe other things, okay? Because our core beliefs start to feel like the truth. We treat them as if they're completely real. Like if I truly believe that other people are unreliable and won't be there for me, that becomes my truth that I apply to all people. But it may not be true for all people. And so I'm missing out at the potential of developing maybe a trusting relationship. And I have body positions and postures and movements that support my belief that you can't trust other people. So I would have to inhibit those tendencies to make room for a different belief, which is maybe some people can be trustworthy, even if others are not, for example, okay? So that's what this one's all about. And the core beliefs could be trauma related or attachment related. So trauma could form the way we believe about the world and how dangerous it might be. And the attachment one might be a little bit more about what we expect from ourselves and other people. Okay, so it could apply to a variety of core beliefs. And this chapter talks about how we could upgrade them. Okay, so here are some tips about breaking free from limiting core beliefs. So first we have to identify what they are. Okay, so sometimes we can even come up with what these beliefs are by tuning into our bodies, because our bodies are holding the belief. So if I think about what my body's sensations are right now, the belief might start to emerge, okay? Or if I think about a triggering memory, sliver of memory, there might be a belief that emerges from that, okay? So I start to gain access to what are my core beliefs. Then I could validate how were they adapted for me in the past? Why did they form? And it was probably for a good reason. I could offer myself compassion for the difficult experiences that might have led me to form these beliefs, such as you can't rely on anybody, right? There's probably some pain that was associated with that. And then I could think of, well, what would I rather believe now that might be more helpful in my current life? For example, maybe some people can be trustworthy, even if others are not. And then I could practice new body postures and movement that help me embody the new beliefs. All right, so that's some of the main ideas from that chapter. Okay, next one's called making sense of emotions. So we move from beliefs to emotions. Obviously, all of them are connected. Okay, so we talked about two concepts, core emotions and pattern emotions. So you think about an apple, because we always talk about an apple core. So the core emotions are our true, authentic emotions that would be part of our experience, even if we weren't worrying about what other people thought, and we expressed our pure emotional experience, pure emotions. That would be our core emotions. So babies are uninhibited in their emotional expression. They'll just express anything that they feel because they haven't been shaped yet. Our pattern emotions are the emotions that were more acceptable for us to express, especially in our families. So I might have had a family where it was okay for girls to be vulnerable, but it wasn't okay for girls to be angry. So I inhibited my anger, but I allowed my vulnerable emotions, such as maybe fear. Okay, other families could be the opposite. Anger and toughness was more acceptable. Vulnerable emotions such as shame were very unacceptable. So you inhibit the ones that the family doesn't like because you want to keep their love, and you allow for the emotions that your family is okay with. And sometimes the emotions the family is okay with get to be exaggerated and dysregulated. So if my family's okay with anger, I might be really angry. Or if my family's okay with fear, I might be really fearful and clingy. And that's what's reinforced. Okay. So the idea, though, is that to be a healthy person, it's allowing everything, full range of experience needs to be allowed and welcomed into our repertoire. So it's important for me to identify which emotions have I been allowing myself to feel and which emotions have I been inhibiting out of habit. So how could I regain access to the emotions that I'm not allowing myself to feel because of my past? So there's different techniques for that, which was reviewed in this chapter, okay? So I could identify which unfamiliar, formerly unacceptable, high and low arousal core emotions I would like to bring back in my repertoire, okay? So maybe, I'm big on anger, but I'm not very big on shame, but shame should be okay. I should be allowed to feel it once in a while. Or maybe I wasn't allowed to feel happy, because how could I feel happy if everyone around me was miserable? So I had to inhibit my happiness, had to curb my enthusiasm, so to speak. So maybe I want to bring some positive emotions back. It could even be something like that. So I could start to identify what would I like to learn how to feel more and start there. Then I can practice embodying those less familiar emotions by allowing my physical, manifestation of the emotions to be present. My facial expressions, gestures, movements, posture, all those help support different emotions or inhibit certain emotions. So if I find myself inhibiting those emotions, I can realize how I'm doing that and start to let go of some of that tension and some of those inhibiting movements and postures. Okay. Sometimes I could also gain access to core emotions by thinking way back at a time where I wanted to feel those things, but I was maybe scolded or yelled at the time when I wanted to express them. So at that moment, I started to learn not to do it. Like say I started to cry and I was yelled at for crying. So I started to inhibit certain feelings of sadness or vulnerability. So how do I get back into that sliver and allow myself to refeel them again and allow them to come out? Okay, that could be one key technique. All right. Next one, moving through the world, how we walk. So earlier, we talked about posture, but then we kind of moved to the next step here by going to our walking style. Because if we want to move forward, we need to walk in a way that supports the way we want to be in the world now. Okay. So we could learn ways to upgrade our walking style. So why is this important? So our walk tells a lot about ourselves. So it tells people what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we're expecting from ourselves and others, how we are allowing others to treat us, how we are probably going to treat other people. And we developed habits of walking as procedural learning a long time ago, probably since we're very little. And sometimes our habits of walking just stay with us, but they're not serving us now, just like all the other things like beliefs, emotions, other kinds of physical postures and movements. So we could start to examine our walking style, understand what it could be reflecting about ourselves, including our anatomy, our history, emotions, beliefs, and even current experience, right? You might walk differently depending on where you're at, who you're with. And then I could start to say, well, should I make some small changes to allow room for a different experience? So for example, if you look on the left, I don't know if you can see my mouse swirling. There's a guy who's kind of like slumped over, looking kind of down, maybe not so confident. So if I had a procedural style of walking that was like that, there's not a lot of room for me to feel confident, just for an example. Or if I walk around like really stiff, tough, I'm not allowing myself room for vulnerability. But it's important for me to be fluid in my walking style so it can convey about different things about what I'm currently feeling and experiencing and convey the things I want to convey. So I could make small changes in my walking style, and then that could allow that to happen. So there's a lot of detail about how to do that in this lesson if you want to watch the original. Okay, next, boundary styles and relationships. So we started to talk about attachment before and how emotions and beliefs developed in our attachment relationships. Our boundary styles also developed in our attachment relationships, and different kinds of boundaries were acceptable and unacceptable when we were growing up with our parents or our caregivers. So we could also learn how to upgrade our boundaries and recognize what styles we currently have, okay? So the first step, we went through the 4 different boundary styles. And when you go through them, you kind of say, all right, yeah, I'm kind of like this one, or I'm kind of like that one, and once you realize that, you could start to make certain shifts if you want to. So you might have an underbounded style, which is like a wide open door where you let in too much and you let out too much. So you might be connected, but not protected. Okay. Overbounded might be walling up too much. You're keeping yourself safe, but you're not connecting with people. And so you might feel a little bit isolated or lonely at times, even though you're preventing yourself from being hurt sometimes. So you're protected, but you're not connected. A pendulum style is when you kind of swing back and forth between underbounded and overbounded, depending on the situation. So for example, sometimes you might be a little underbounded, you might reveal too much or let in too much, and then you feel regretful about it or violated or uncomfortable. And so you respond by going the other extreme and like closing up shop and not letting anybody in and not revealing anything and not trusting. But then you start to feel lonely. So eventually you start to creep the other way and maybe you let loose a little bit too much. So that's a pendulum. Incomplete is where you're generally healthy, but in certain situations or certain people, they kind of push your buttons in such a way that you become underbounded or overbounded. Whereas most of the time you have healthy kind of in between boundaries that are appropriate and effective for you. Okay. And we also in this chapter explored different ways of saying no and yes with your body to help reinforce boundaries in relationships. So there's physical ways that we can encourage a yes, and the physical ways we can encourage a no, so that our words match up with our body language and we're more effective in letting people in or keeping people out. And when we're more confident with that, we are more able to connect with others, okay? It's easier to let people in our life when we know it's possible to keep them out too, okay? It's like a dialectic. You really need both. So it's easier to let people in when you know that if it goes too far, you could put the brakes on it, okay? So let's just define proximity seeking for a sec. So proximity seeking is our ability to move closer to people or to get people to come closer to us. And the ability is to successfully balance this with a boundary. And these develop since we're babies, okay? Even babies like will cry or reach out for their parents to come closer. And when babies are older, they're able to move toward their parents to get closer too. But we still need people in our life, and we still have ways physically and verbally of bringing people closer or moving closer to people. But the way we develop our proximity seeking style has a lot to do with the way we're brought up and our attachment style. So for example, if you tend to be very clingy and wanting a lot of merging, a lot of closeness, but you're not very tolerant of difference and separation, you might have an anxious ambivalent attachment style. If you avoid reaching out at all because you don't really believe people are going to reach back, you might be afraid of being rejected or ignored by others. So you don't even reach out at all. Like, why even bother? That might be related to an anxious avoidant attachment style. If you have a lot of trauma, the same person you wanted to get close to might be the very same person that also hurt you in other circumstances. So as you get close to people, your fight, flight, freeze, fold system might kick in. And so you have animal defenses at the same time as reaching out and wanting to get close to somebody. So it might have a very uncomfortable feeling when you get close, but yet feeling distant also doesn't feel great either. Okay, so that might be more associated with a disorganized, disoriented attachment style. All right, so we could recognize what our proximity seeking actions are like, including the way we move and gesture toward people, which is reviewed in this chapter, okay? And we could also then decide to upgrade our proximity seeking actions so that they're more associated with a secure attachment style. So when we more unambivalently and comfortably reach out for people with the belief that people will likely return our gesture or like be there for us, that kind of develops when we have a little more confidence in ourselves and other people. But we can slowly start to build that into our proximity seeking actions. Okay, then super important chapter, pleasure play and positive emotions. So as I said earlier, when we want to move forward in our life, we have to build in the good stuff too. We want to not just pull out the weeds, we also want to plant flowers. We want to build in good things so we could really enjoy and appreciate our life, especially if we've been through a lot, right? All right, so when we grew up, there may not have been a lot of room to play and have fun. It might have been discouraged by our family. Our parents might have been too busy for that. They might have gotten mad if we got too silly. It might have been inhibited for other reasons. Maybe we were, too traumatized or too distressed to have the room to play and have fun. It could have been a variety of reasons, but for whatever the reason back then that it didn't occur or got, there was a stop put to it, we could still build it into our life now, okay? So some key tips that we went over in this chapter was we can learn to identify our triggers, so to speak, for positive emotions and playfulness. So even in small moments now, what makes me feel happy? What makes me feel playful and having fun? And then I could also notice moments of playfulness in myself and or others. And instead of overlooking it, oh yeah, I guess I did have a little fun earlier today, or we did have a little bit of a laugh at work before, and and we had a little positive light moment there. And then when I identify those, I can maybe make efforts to bring them in a little more often and to kind of incorporate more play and fun into our lives. I could also try to do more activities that tend to increase positive emotions. Like, what are some things that I enjoy doing that maybe I haven't done in a while? And these are the things that increase high arousal positive emotions, like kind of more energy and excitement positive emotions, but also more relaxing and restful positive emotions, kind of like curling up and enjoying a good book or soft music or meditation, right? We could also notice physically what playful body movements and actions we would like to exhibit more of, kind of identify those and try to bring those into our repertoire. We could also notice times when our body may tense up and hold us back from exhibiting those things, and then let go of that tension and allow some of the other more playful movements to emerge. Okay, and finally, challenging your window of tolerance. So essentially, most of the lessons helped us in various ways to expand our window of tolerance by allowing more emotions, by building our resources, by expanding the amount of situations we could be in without losing control, and by staying in that comfortable level of arousal. But in this particular chapter, we had a very specific way of expanding our window of tolerance by balancing safety and novelty. So when we're too safe, we keep our lives very small and predictable, and we don't try new things. We kind of keep things very the same because it makes us feel more comfortable. But that could be kind of boring, right? And it's hard to really expand our repertoire and enjoy new things or learn new things about ourselves if we're keeping things too much the same or too safe. But if I'm too much in novelty and I take uninhibited, impulsive risks, I could really get myself in trouble. I could, misstep, or I could, ruin relationships, or I could get physically hurt, or other things could happen that are problematic. But there's ways to balance safety and novelty. Sometimes, I could kind of toggle back and forth, like I could have some things the same and then some things new. And when I do try new things, I could think it through first. I could say, all right, what are some of the benefits here? What are some of the risks? What are some of the possible consequences? What do I want to do? What maybe I could learn something new. I could travel somewhere new, meet new people. I could bring some exciting freshness and newness into my life, but in a way that's not too risky in a problematic way. I mean, clearly it's still a risk because we never know what's going to happen when we try something new, but I could use my resources to help me tolerate some of the discomfort that comes with those risks. So I'm bringing back my resources again in this situation so that I could be more comfortable with more uncertainty in terms of trying new things. And you discover new things about yourself when you try new stuff. And it helps you just expand as a person and really enjoy your life more. All right, so that's it. We made it to the end. And for those of you who are my regular viewers, and I think you know who you are, thank you very much for tuning in. And for my new viewers, welcome, and feel free to look back. It's been quite a journey doing these sensorimotor psychotherapy skills with you. It was as helpful for me, I think, as it might be for you. Very useful material. So thank you again. And probably going to take a little break, but I'll be back soon with some other stuff on my channel. All right. Hope you're all doing well, and keep at it. Okay. You could do this. All right. Thanks again. And I'll see you soon. Take care.